Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. Good ground it was assembled, Hare Krishna. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gaur. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Canto 10, chapter 2, verse 14, is that correct?
Yes. 14, yes.
Okay.
Ici, qui ne comprend pas l'anglais, qui a besoin d'une traduction. Oui.
Okay, we'll begin by reciting the verse together. Sandishtaivam Bhagavata Tadetyo Niti Tadvachaha Pratigriya Parikramya Gangata Tattata Karot Sandishtaivam Bhagavata Tadetyam iti tadvachaha Pratigrihya Parikramya Gangata Tattata Karot Sandishtaivam Bhagavata Tatetyam iti tadvachaha Pratigrihya Parikramya Gangata Tattata Karot. Please go ahead and recite.
Sandishtaivam Bhagavata Tatheti Iti Tadvachaha Pratigriya Parikramya
Sandishtaivam Bhagavata Tatetyahom Itadvacha Pratigriya Parikramya Gangata Tattata Karot
Sandishtaivam Bhagavata
Tatetyam iti tadvachaha
Pratigriya Parikramya
Gangata Tattata Karot. Mataji's. Sandishtaivam Bhagavata Pratigrihya parikramya Gangata Tattatha Karot Sandishta having been ordered Evam thus Bhagavata by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Tata iti so be it Om affirmation by the mantra Om Iti thus Tatvachaha his words Pratigrihya accepting the order Parikramya after circumambulating him Gam to the surface of the globe Gata she immediately went Tat the order as given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Tata just so Akarot executed Translation Thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yogamaya immediately agreed. With the Vedic mantra Om, she confirmed that she would do what he asked. Thus, having accepted the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, she circumambulated him and started for the place on earth known as Nanda Gokula. There she did everything just as she had been told. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. After receiving the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yogamaya twice confirmed her acceptance by saying, "Yes, sir, I shall do as you order," and then saying, "Om." Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that Om signifies Vedic confirmation. Thus, Yogamaya very faithfully received the Lord's order as a Vedic injunction. It is a fact that whatever is spoken by the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a Vedic injunction that no one should neglect. In Vedic injunctions there are no mistakes, illusions, cheating, or imperfection. Unless one understands the authority of the Vedic version, there is no purpose in quoting Shastra. No one should violate the Vedic injunctions. Rather, one should strictly execute the orders given in the Vedas. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 16:24, Tasmat chastram pramanam te karya karya vyavastito gyatva shastra vidhanuktam karma kartami harvasi. One should understand what is duty and what is not duty by the regulations of the scriptures. Knowing such rules and regulations, one should act so that one may gradually be elevated. Om Ganatimirantasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll repeat the translation one more time. Thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yogamaya immediately agreed. With the Vedic mantra Om, she confirmed that she would do what he asked. Thus, having accepted the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, she circumambulated him and started for the place on earth known as Nanda Gokula. There she did everything just as she had been told. So before trying to speak on this verse, I'd like to seek the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas. Please kindly shower me with your prayers and blessings, and I may be able to say something that is beneficial in this class. So here in this verse, we see that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, has just given an order to his own Yogamaya potency. And this is part of his arrangement for making his appearance on the planet Earth. And it seems that in the purport, the main point that Srila Prabhupada is bringing out here is that when Krishna spoke to Yogamaya, she accepted his order as a Vedic injunction. She accepted Krishna's word as a Vedic injunction. In other words, she accepted it as absolute, as an absolute authority that doesn't actually need verification from any other source. She wasn't going to first verify it by testing it out through some experiments with her own senses, checking with her own eyes to see if this might be the right course of action. She wasn't checking it against her own reasoning or abilities in logic. She wasn't testing it against a source like, for example, the newspaper or what the latest scientific research has come out with. She accepted Krishna's word as axiomatically true from the start. And this is practically a cornerstone in the Vedic approach to understanding life, to understanding reality, or rather, the cornerstone. And Prabhupada mentions one very good reason why not only Yogamaya accepts Krishna's words in this way, but actually why all of human society should accept Krishna's words in this way, why all of human society would benefit in our attempt to understand things as they are, to understand life, to understand reality. I mean, we can see that even though people have many different points of view and many different opinions in the world, basically everybody wants to try and understand somehow or other what's the best way to live. What is the most accurate understanding of reality, of this world that we live in, the reality that we face every day. There are many debates on many programs to try and understand what is the best way to live, what is the highest understanding of life and reality. Much time and energy is exhausted in political debates, back and forth between news commentators to try and understand what is the proper course in life. Many people are taking the help of many self-help books, and practically the libraries and bookstores are lined with self-help books. Many people are trying to they're consulting those books because they want to try and understand what is the best way for me to live my life. What is how can I align my life with truth or the realities of life in the most healthy and beneficial way. So Srila Prabhupada is mentioning a very good reason why we would most benefit actually from accepting Krishna's words as the words which can actually give us that alignment. He says, in the Vedic injunctions, there are no mistakes, illusions, cheating, or imperfection. So this is, if there's out of all the sources of knowledge that we might try to consult in newspaper, self-help books, philosophers, scientists, if we were able to find the source which it was guaranteed that there were no mistakes coming from the persons giving that source, that there were that those persons were not under any kinds of illusions, that they were completely free from the cheating propensity, and that that such persons have actually perfect perception and faculties of thought for analyzing, then I think we would consider that was a very, very beneficial source to take advantage of, and that we would probably want to take information from there in forming our life. So Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is beyond the material energy. He is completely transcendental to matter, and he's fully spiritual. And in the spiritual world, in spiritual life, we don't find mistakes, illusion, cheating, or imperfection. We may find these things to be a normal part of life, but it's actually only a normal part of material life. And there is a region of existence which is beyond this world of cheating and illusion and mistakes and imperfection. And actually, this region is quite a small part of the whole existence. Prabhupada sometimes describes that he describes the vastness of the spiritual world. There are so many Vaikuntha planets, and on all these Vaikuntha planets, the living entities are working in perfect cooperation, actually perfect loving cooperation with one another, orbiting themselves, orbiting their lives around God, around the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in this way, all their activities are completely harmonious, just as if you take many rocks and you drop them in one spot, in a lake, for example, or in a pond, then they'll make one unified, harmonious, concentric circle. It goes out, it will make a very nice ripple. But if you take those rocks and you throw them high up in the air, and each one lands in a different spot, then you just kind of have a mess of different movement within the water. You drop them all in one spot, you'll find a very beautiful concentric circle emanate from there. So that's like life in the spiritual world. That's like spiritual life. Everybody's heart is centered on the same point. There's no competition. In the material world, the tendency is each person has got their own ambitions, and other persons are valuable. I have my own ambitions, and other persons are valuable to me to the extent that they're willing to get in line with my vision of how my life is going to go, how I'm going to be able to navigate this world successfully, manipulate this world successfully, and gain the pleasures and enjoyment that I want to have. If somebody's willing to cooperate with that to some extent, then I may consider that person a friend or a well-wisher or a confidant. And then to the extent that somebody is their own little ripple, their own little wave of a ripple is conflicting with mine, and I'll consider that person an enemy. And in this way there's many small living entities moving about the material world, trying to make their own God project and competing with every other living entity who's trying to do the same thing. And so it creates a very unharmonious situation. But in the spiritual world, everybody has understood who should be the central orbit, that our nature is to serve. And we find happiness not in trying to serve our own small ambitions, but by trying to serve the person who is our common root, our common source, and who is essentially our common Father. And so this is the business in the spiritual world. And Prabhupada describes that among all those planets in the spiritual world and the vast sky of the spiritual world, there's one little corner where there's a little dark cloud. And Prabhupada says that dark cloud is the material world. And because it just so happens that as living entities we have the free will to choose what we want to do, and Krishna always respects that free will. And so if somebody gets the idea that maybe I should be in the center, maybe I'd actually like it better if people were serving me, then Krishna's very kind. There's a place that you can go to experiment with that idea. And that's this cloud in the corner of the spiritual sky. And so actually that's the situation of the material world. It's actually quite small. Prabhupada also gave the example of like every city will have a prison. And for the prisoners, that prison is that is life in, let's say, Chicago. That is life in Chicago. Life in Chicago means, these walls with barbed wire at the top, and they become very accustomed to that life, and they're not very much aware of what goes on outside those walls. But actually the city of Chicago is a big place, and most of the citizens are roaming in freedom, going about their life, and they have that freedom because they're acting in harmony with the laws of the state. And actually the prison is just like a very small part of the whole city of Chicago. But for those living in it, it may feel very big. So in this small cloud, in this corner of the spiritual sky, here we are subject to these four things that Prabhupada is mentioning: mistakes, illusions, cheating, and imperfection. So our senses are imperfect. Our ability to perceive things is really, really limited. I can only perceive a certain distance, and if I should happen to lose my glasses when I'm walking through the forest path one day, then my vision becomes even more limited. Like, I don't have my glasses, so I have to hold this book this close to my face to be able to see it. And let's see, we tend to become illusioned. It's a normal thing that happens to us, probably on a daily basis. I have a glass of water and I think I'm about to put it on the table, and then I drop it and it falls on the floor. Or I'm walking down the stairs and I think I'm already at the last step, but I don't realize there's one more step down, and so I go, oh. And this is a normal part of life here. And we make mistakes often, we misjudge things. That may be a source of problems in relationships. We misjudge somebody's intentions, and we may think that person an enemy because they did this to me, and then later on we find out that actually their intentions were completely innocent, and I perceived something that wasn't actually there. And then the cheating tendency is there. We see that that's quite strong in the world actually. We regularly hear in the news that some high up executive person has gotten in trouble because of some illegal business activity. And also one example Prabhupada often brought out is that although the scientists who are considered great authorities in terms of analyzing what is reality, what is life, and the modern age, although they can't deny that they have imperfect senses, that they have a tendency to become illusion, and that they regularly make mistakes in their work, and therefore have to revise the scientific textbooks and change them every year to update them, because the previous ones, turns out some things were wrong with that one. They still say, but don't worry, the latest edition is definitely trustworthy. You can definitely trust in this latest version. And we're definitely, you can trust us to make conclusions about things that happened in the universe billions of years ago when we weren't there, and you can trust us to make conclusions about parts of the universe that are very, very far away, that we hardly have access to at all. And so persons still tend to present themselves as basically worthy of being absolute authorities in spite of having so many imperfections and mistakes. So yes, in this material world we're accustomed to this, and so we think it's okay if our sources of authority have, to a certain extent, a tendency to be imperfect and make mistakes, and we have to keep revising the textbooks. But what we don't realize is that this actually isn't normal. And actually the normal process for acquiring knowledge in the healthy state of a living entity is actually exhibited here in this verse. Because of course, Yoga Maya is the Lord's internal potency. So she's an all-perfect spiritual energy of the Lord, who is also, of course, a person, as we see in this verse. And so she's demonstrating what is most natural, what is actually the most natural, healthy way to acquire knowledge is by consulting the absolute spiritual source of all knowledge and accepting that in that way, understanding that spiritual transmission of knowledge is free from imperfections, illusions, mistakes, and cheating. And so there's great benefit to taking to this path of seeking out an absolute source of knowledge. And although from the point of view of perhaps some persons in the modern day, that may seem like a bit of a blind thing to do. It may seem like if I take to that path, I might have to become dogmatic and become kind of like just sort of following blindly. It may seem like that. However, one thing that anybody will have to acknowledge is that actually whether you take to a spiritual method for gaining knowledge or a material method for gaining knowledge, if you look at a person's understanding of the world and understanding of life, there's actually very little knowledge that we don't gain from some kind of authority. Like how much, like looking at our whole understanding of life, like here's Australia, here's China, the purpose of life is, to have a good education so that you can get a nice job, make a nice money, have all the amenities you need, or whatever kind of schema a person might develop about what is the purpose of life, what is the geography of the globe, what is outer space like. There's very little that we've actually, based on our own direct perception and our own critical thinking, we've practically gained 99.9% of it from placing our faith in an authority outside of myself, whose credibility I ultimately can't directly verify. So like, how many people here have ever been to, let's say, Laos? Okay, we've got one person from the country of Laos.
No, visitor.
Two. Three? Three people who have visited the country of Laos personally. They've actually gone to verify with their own senses that it exists. How many people believe in the country of Laos? How many people believe that it exists? It seems that most everybody here. So, are you all blind followers? There's very little that we can actually confirm with our own senses, even of this material globe, you know. So we all depend on some outside authority, and we can't exactly verify their work. I can't exactly go up to Google's satellites and verify that what I see on Google Maps is the actual thing. Everything's calibrated correctly. So whether your preference is a more material way of gaining knowledge or spiritual way of gaining knowledge, we all depend on placing our faith in some kind of higher authority. So why not seek out that higher authority who may be without illusion, without imperfection, without mistakes, and especially without the propensity to cheat. Prabhupada makes another very interesting statement here. He says, unless one understands the authority of the Vedic version, there's no purpose in quoting Shastra. And I can't help but think that actually there's many, Prabhupada mentioned how there's many editions of Bhagavad Gita out in the world, but it's very difficult to recommend any of them. There's very few that we could actually recommend to read, because there are many editions which are written by persons who don't actually accept the Vedic injunctions as absolute sound, and so they tend to describe it in a manner that, like, say they're reading some verses and they'll say, oh yes, this is very nice, and this is what we should take from this verse, and this is what we should learn. And then in the next verse they'll say, well, there's a few mistakes in this verse, so be careful not to follow this part, and here's what it actually means. And and actually we see that when a person wants to, they kind of realize that there is a need to go to the spiritual level, and they start to want to inquire about spiritual life, there's a tendency to want to kind of approach the various scriptures of the world with this mood of kind of like, I'll read it, and the parts of it that resonate with me, I'll take those parts, and the parts that don't resonate with me, I'll kind of just leave those aside, and in this way I'll sort of develop my own sort of brand of spirituality that I know resonates with me. And we can understand why persons might want to take to that particular approach, because, as we were saying, there's kind of a general stigma in society that, you know, if you just accept a scripture as giving absolute knowledge, then you might become like a blind person, a blind follower, following dogmatically. But one of the great challenges of taking this approach of just accepting what resonates with you is that what we'll actually end up doing is, rather than accepting any of those scriptures as an authority, we'll end up accepting our own mind as an authority. Because basically what it boils down to is, when my mind likes it, then I take it, and when my mind doesn't like it, I set it aside. And so I believe it was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur who pointed out that one who takes a little bit from here, and a little bit from here, from a little bit from here, even though those may be spiritual authorities they're taking from, actually they end up not accepting any spiritual authority, they only end up accepting the instructions of their own mind. And basing our life on the instructions of our mind becomes a big problem for us because, as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, that actually the mind can be either the best of friends or the worst of enemies. And the elaboration on that is that when the mind is very much attached to sense objects and seeking out those sense objects to derive sense pleasure from them, then in that state, the mind becomes our worst enemy. But when the mind becomes liberated from attachment when the mind is detached from sense objects, then the mind can become a source of liberation instead of bondage. But in the conditioned state, our minds are actually completely geared towards seeking out sense objects for sense gratification. And so when we take a little bit from this scripture, a little bit from that scripture, based on what we feel resonates with us, we actually end up just perpetuating the same thing that we were doing in material life, which was the mind thought that it was a really good idea to make money and have a really nice house, a really cool car, have a really beautiful boyfriend or girlfriend. But then we saw that didn't actually make me happy. I need to go higher, I need to go to spiritual life. But then we end up doing the same thing. Oh, I think that this understanding of spiritual path will make me happy, and this understanding, we're actually perpetuating the same process that we were doing before taking an interest in spiritual topics. And so this this gives us yet another compelling reason to follow in the footsteps of Yogamaya, who is accepting Krishna's word as a Vedic injunction, as an absolute authority, and that allows you to just completely bypass the mind. One of the statements of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita is Ya Shastra Vidhim Utsurja Vartate Kamakaritaha Na Susidhim Avaplanti Na Sukham Na Parangati. Krishna says that one who gives up the injunctions found in the scriptures and chooses to conduct their life according to their own desires, or basically according to their own whims, their own whimsical desires, for that person is not going to attain happiness, they're not going to attain the supreme destination, and they're not going to attain perfection in life. And this is a really good thing to know, because practically everybody in the world is going around with this idea that if I just act independently according to what I feel is going to make me happy, that's what's going to make me happy. And unfortunately it's a big bluff, and we will really all benefit from coming out of this idea, from going beyond this idea. And I think personally the most jarring thing in this verse is that not only do you not attain perfection by doing that, you don't attain the supreme destination. Actually, you don't even get a little bit of happiness. It's practically, that's the whole point of going out there in your quest for what's going to make me happy, what's going to thrill me, what's going to excite me, what's going to is that the whole point is to become happy. And I think I could give up the perfection or give up attaining the supreme destination if I could just get some promise of happiness. But even that's not going to be found in that path. The final statement that Prabhupada makes in this purport is he quotes the Bhagavad Gita verse, stating how from the scriptures we can find out what to do and what not to do. And he says that when we know such rules and regulations, then we can act in such a way that we're gradually elevated. And this is ultimately the crux of the whole matter, is that the reason why we can wholeheartedly embrace the instructions found in Shastra or scripture is because, as Prabhupada states here, by that path we become elevated. We can actually go upward. And everybody wants to go upward in life. it's very obvious. You can look at anybody, they want to go upward. We all have very differing opinions in the world of what will take me upward. But everybody wants to go upward. And the scriptures, the Shastras, the Vedas, they want to elevate us. That's what they're here for. That's what Krishna spoke them for. Every word in the Vedas is benevolent and has been sent to us by Krishna to help us. And so these books, they're just saturated with benevolence and compassion for all living entities and for the desire to uplift us and make us happy. And the only thing that we have to do is just approach these scriptures with a spirit of cooperation. And even if, let's say we're sort of new to approaching the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, so of course naturally we wouldn't necessarily feel confident giving ourselves to it 100% yet, because, you know, there's kind of like, I don't really know what this is yet, how am I going to fully give myself to this? But that's okay, because Prabhupada's presented these books for our intelligent consideration, so we can take them and we can do a trial run with them. We can just you can try out chanting the name of Krishna, which is recommended throughout Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. We can try out refraining from 4 illicit activities that are that act as a very strong obstacle in spiritual life. For example, the main 4 are eating meat, engaging in intoxication, through drinking or smoking, and etc. Through having illicit sexual connections, and through gambling. We can do a trial run. I'm going to see what my life is like when I give up these things and I try to take to this spiritual practice that's being proposed. And in this way we can, by trying it out, we will be exposed actually to the benevolent nature of these books and how they're trying to help us, because we'll be able to see ourselves being elevated the more that we try it out. So, as Prabhupada said many, many times, this is not a sectarian path, it's not a dogmatic path, and it's actually a very scientific approach to inquiring about spiritual reality. And Prabhupada stated that he wanted to develop a society of independently thoughtful individuals. So all the individuals in the Krishna Consciousness Society, we accept the word of Krishna, or the Vedas, as axiomatic truths, as absolute truths. But you can find that doesn't bar one from being an independent thinker and applying one's own intelligence, and even having some differences in approach to practicing spiritual life. So we're not trying to make Hare Krishna clones in the world. Everybody has a unique position, a unique personality, a unique condition, and even while accepting the Vedas as absolute authority, and as Yogamaya is doing here, unhesitatingly executing those orders that we receive from the Lord, from the spiritual master who represents him, and from the Vedas, we all maintain our individual personalities and our own ability to contribute uniquely to the Krishna consciousness movement and to the world. So that's my little extrapolation of what we're reading today in the verse and in the purport. Please kindly let me know if I may have made some mistakes. Otherwise, we can, let's see, what time is it? We just have a few minutes before the class ends. So if anybody has any comments or questions, we'll be happy to hear them now. Yes, Sundar Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. You spoke about intelligence, or using our own intelligence. We understand that we have to feed our intelligence actually to make it strong by the Shastras, by the scriptures. So when we say that we have to, like Prabhupada encourages at the end of the Bhagavad Gita to use our own intelligence to, to study the thing and analyze and everything. But at the same time, intelligence is supposed to be on the basis of the scriptures. So how to study, how to analyze the scriptures with intelligence, independent. You know what? You understand what I mean? Because what part of intelligence is supposed to be used to analyze the scriptures, since the intelligence is supposed to be directed by the scriptures. I don't know if I express myself correctly or maybe not. Understand what I mean?
I kind of understand.
It's like
Maybe I don't have the intelligence. I'm quite confused. Would anybody who did understand like to try and, maybe Mother Devaki, would you like to give an answer to that?
Or maybe the guidance of senior devotees, whose intelligence is maybe more spiritualized and developed than our own. I once heard a nice little thing from His Holiness Radhanaswami in regards to our enthusiasm. He was saying, if our enthusiasm is not guided by a higher intelligence than our own, we easily become fanatics. So, and that same principle, I think, we could also apply in this connection. That's why we don't only need the Shastra, but the senior devotees. And we should hear from the senior devotees, because they already have assimilated the knowledge more than we have. Maybe that could help.
Yeah, I mean, we could argue that the senior devotees also, are taking their intelligence from Shastras. So we're coming back to the same point again, that how to analyze the Shastras with our intelligence. If it seems like there is a part of us that, like maybe you could put intuition or some, it's like that, analyze even the scriptures and think, yes, this is good for me, this is not good for me, or you know what I mean? It's like
I think we have to be careful, otherwise we just
pick
pick out what we like. This is good for me, or not, not good for me.
Analyzing doesn't mean that we like the scholars, Mondial scholars, they do a critical text analysis. It's not what it means. It means that we use our intelligence to understand what is said here. How does it apply in my life? Not to question, is it actually true or something like that. That's the kind of analysis that we do.
I think there is a little bit of distinction between intelligence in terms of the analytical tool and intelligence as a sign of a person who is, I don't know what the synonym is of intelligent. If you know what I mean. Intelligence as a tool, or intelligence as how do you explain myself? Difficult to explain. But someone who is intelligent. So Prabhupada would often say that mundane scientists are not intelligent. Although they might appear to be very learned, but they have not surrendered to Krishna, so they are not considered intelligent. Whereas devotees, they might not have scientific degrees, but they've surrendered themselves to Krishna, so they are actually intelligent. So if we talk about intelligence as a construct in our brain. And I agree with Prabhu. He said we don't actually go about analyzing every little bit of information we find in the Shastra. For the most part, we accept what's said by Krishna. But if we're having trouble maybe applying in our life, then we need to do a little bit of analysis of that. And how do I apply it properly? And how does it apply to me? So maybe that's when we do a little bit of analysis, we might not be 100% sure how that particular point applies in my life. So we might consult with other devotees. But I think for the most part we accept the Shastra, Krishna statement. But sometimes there might be some points which are, we're not sure about. We might have to consult with others.
Yeah, that made me think that actually whether you're using your intelligence in as a spiritual practitioner who's committed to a spiritual path and a certain source of knowledge, or whether you're in the realm of, let's say, material academia, and you're using your intelligence in that field. In both cases, actually, there is a need to accept certain axiomatic truths. So, maybe you could take the example of Descartes, like, I think, therefore I am. It's like, well, I must be a living being because I can think. But if we can't even start with, like, am I a living being or not? Well, maybe I shouldn't even think about anything if I'm not a living being. So there's always certain axiomatic truths that you have to accept. And so also within the realm of material academia, there's axiomatic truths like, for example, we're capable of understanding things through our senses. Otherwise, if they didn't at least have something like that, how can you even begin a discussion? And so in spiritual circles, we have different axiomatic truths, a different source of axiomatic truths. But in both cases, they're applying their intelligence within the framework of whatever axiomatic truths that they accept. So it's kind of like both are there. We accept our intelligence to be informed on the basis of the Vedic scriptures, and then within that framework we also use our intelligence to understand them. So like when Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am the taste of water, and we accept that axiomatically that Krishna is the taste of water, and we might drink some water to think, and thinking like, how exactly is Krishna the taste of water? Let me try and understand how Krishna is the taste of water. So we try and taste it. But we're not going to taste water thinking, is Krishna the taste of water? Let me see if I can verify this or not. So in both cases, the person's trying to use their intelligence. But in one case, because they're a devotee who accepts Krishna's word, they're going to use their intelligence just to understand the word, not to verify the word or not. So maybe that's...
Just make me think also that we have to start with what we have. We have material intelligence, our mind is material, our senses are conditioned. We cannot understand Krishna with these conditioned senses, Atashi Krishna Namadi, but we have to start with them. Actually, this is the good use of using our intelligence. And then we get purified, they get purified, and then they understand more and more actually, because it gets purified by the process. But this is the best use. But as you said, it has to be, both have to be based on the faith. But we have to start with what we have actually, anyway.
Thank you.
Also not forget that Krishna can be a source of knowledge, aham smriti jnanam apohmanuscha as well. So if we are sincere in our endeavor, he will provide that knowledge as well. So we don't have to rely on our strength, like on our ability. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're almost to the end, but I saw Julian's hand was up, so we'll have one more and then we'll end the class.
Thank you for the class. All of these questions made me think when we analyze Shastra and try to use our intelligence. Where is sometimes maybe the mind takes up like the more of the analyzing and stuff. So how do we know when we're using intelligence and sometimes we're using the mind?
Yeah. So Krishna anticipated this actually, and that's why along with the Vedas, he gave the Vedas his own sound vibration, which emanated and became the forms of the Vedas, the scriptures. And he also set up a system by which persons could come down accompanying that knowledge of the Vedas. So the first person was Lord Brahma. So he Brahmadridaya Adhikavi, something like that. I may have gotten that a bit wrong, but he basically transmitted the knowledge into Lord Brahma's heart. He empowered him to understand perfectly. And then Lord Brahma continued the chain. He also instructed the next person and empowered him to understand it perfectly, Narada Muni. And then Narada Muni instructed it to Vyasadeva. And there's the instruction, and then there's divine empowerment coming down with that instruction. So that lineage goes on even up to today. And so that gives us the ability to consult with persons who have, first of all, started out as students, just like we have, and then by perfectly accepting the instructions of their spiritual master and carrying out those instructions, following those instructions in their life, then they gain realization, and there's empowerment that comes. It's not just the learning and the doing. It's actually that by sincerely learning and inquiring and hearing and sincerely serving, then we please Krishna, we please his devotee, and then there's empowerment to understand it. This is revealed in the verse, Yasya deve para bhaktir yatha deve tatagaro tasya ite katitakyarta prakashante mahatmana. And that is that for one who has unflinching faith in Krishna and his representative, the spiritual master, for that person, all the imports of the Vedas are automatically revealed within the heart. So then, this parampara, the disciplic succession, it's a system for transferring knowledge down the generations so that everybody can access it, but it's also a transfer of empowerment through this prakashante mahatmanaha. Lord Krishna actually reveals it within the hearts to make sure it's full and complete and fully understood. And then we can consult with such persons, because of course we do have to make decisions in our life, and we try the best to use our intelligence informed by Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, but then there's always that possibility that the mind is going to come in, and he's actually put his own points in there, and we didn't quite realize it, and we were thinking, no, I'm just doing what Prabhupada said, or I'm just doing what the Bhagavad Gita said. So surely it's good we can consult with persons who we see they have advanced by being a very good disciple and very good servant. They've basically advanced into a master who's capable of guiding others, who's got deep realization, and they're very expert at understanding what we may have put in of our own, from our own mind. And so that consultation is basically the best method for doing that. So in this way, we have a triumvirate of sources. So that's the Shastra, the scripture, and then the spiritual master, which is Guru, and then Sadhu, which is other advanced devotees or previous acharyas in the line, whose works are still there and registered. So thank you very much for kindly giving me the opportunity to purify myself by speaking from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and thank you so much for your lively participation. I'm really enthused by all of you. So thank you very much. Grantaraja Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Shantatma Prabhu ki jai.